friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria, and if you were watching this on the day that I uploaded it, it is my 25th birthday today. I am terrified to turn 25. It just seems like an age where I should have my shit together, and I absolutely do not. But last year for my 24th birthday, I did a video of 24 books that were important throughout my life, 24 books that I loved that made a severe impact on my life and my reading journey. And for this year, I didn't want to do the same video. Obviously, I wanted to do something different. So for this video, I'm going to be talking about 25 of my favorite books of all time. They are all romance books, and they're all absolute favorites of all time. They are books that I wouldn't change a single thing about. They are perfect in my eyes, and I 100% love them. I think that these 25 books are a great representation of my reading tastes, of my favorite tropes, of my favorite subgenres. They are ones that I love dearly, and if you took a look at these 25 books as a whole, it should tell you a lot about what I love in a romance book, and I'm gonna share them all with you. And obviously these are not my only favorite books, but they are the top 25 when I was thinking about what is a good representation of my reading taste, what are books that I would not change a single thing about. These were the 25 that came to my mind. So I have them all stacked up on a chair next to me. I own 23 of them. There are 2 that I don't own, and I'm actually going to start with the 2 that I don't own just so that I don't forget them and do 23 books instead of 25 books. So the first one that I have is one that I don't own, and that is Lola and the Millionaires by Catherine Moon. This is actually an Omega-verse reverse harem duet. I love it dearly. It is about a heroine named Lola who has been through some serious shit. In book 1 in the series, which is called Baby and the Late Night Howlers, Lola goes through some really serious trauma. She ends up getting assaulted and held captive by this group of men. She is a beta, and she for her entire life always wanted to be an omega. She felt like omegas were special, and she wanted to be loved and be looked at by men like omegas are. And then after what happens in book 1, she completely changes her mind. She becomes terrified of alphas. Because of the trauma that she suffered in book 1, she just becomes completely terrified, cut off from the world, because she doesn't want to be in a space where she's around other alphas. And she ends up deciding that she needs to get back to her life, and she gets a job, a dream job at this fashion company. And she shows up, and she one day ends up getting stuck in the elevator with a group of alphas and completely terrified, but these alphas do a great job of making her feel more comfortable, of trying to calm her, and she ends up having a relationship with 4 alphas and a omega, and they're all men, and she has to overcome her trauma, work through her trauma, and become a little more comfortable in her anxiety and around other people. And it is just an absolutely gorgeous, beautiful story about Lola overcoming trauma, of her dealing with her panic attacks, her anxiety, and it is a very, to me at least, a very accurate representation of dealing with trauma, of the sometimes you have really good days and you feel like you're going forward, and the next day you'll have a setback and you'll feel like you walked back 10 steps, and then the next day you walk forward a couple of more. It is always this back and forth. It is never just a you're going forward and you don't have setbacks. It is always a journey, and I think it's beautifully done. I absolutely love it, and it is one of my favorite books of all time. The second book that I have that I don't own is one that I actually read this year, and so I'm waiting for the new covers to come out before I buy the book, and that is The Right Move by Liz Tom Ford. This is definitely one that is going to end up on my top favorites of 2023. I read it a couple of months ago and I honestly have not stopped thinking about it. This one is about a heroine named Indy who had been in a relationship with a man for a while. She was very much in love with him until one day she comes home and finds him cheating on her. She leaves her house. She cannot be around him anymore. She breaks up with him, but she ends up having no place to live. And her best friend Stevie ends up asking Stevie's brother Ryan if Indy can stay with him. He has an empty room after Stevie moved out and Ryan doesn't need the rent, and Indy needs to be able to build up some savings because she has nothing. Her entire plans have been disrupted because of her boyfriend cheating on her. And so Ryan reluctantly agrees. He's a very private person. He's somebody who likes his own space and he is not prepared for his sister's best friend to move in, but he reluctantly agrees and Indy moves in, and the two of them are so completely perfect for one another. Ryan is so private and he likes things just so, and Indy is the chaos that he perfectly needs in his life, and they work together so well. They are yin and yang and they just perfectly match one another. They're very much different but fit together so well, and they end up having a fake dating romance, and it is beautiful. It is one of my favorite books of this year. It is just so perfectly done. The romance is just gorgeous. Ryan is the kind of man that I would want to end up with. He is just such a good guy and so real, and I loved this book so much. The third book that has to be on my 25 favorite books of all time is, of course, Brooklyn Air by Serena Bowen. This is a book that I read many years ago. I think it's 4 or 5 years ago at this point. I have reread it so many times. There's just something about this book that works so well for me. This series is one of the series that helped me get into hockey romance. Serena Bowen helped me get into hockey romance. Serena Bowen was honestly one of the people who really got me into reading indie romance in the first place. I got into reading romance with historicals, but indie romance, Serena Bowen. I have read every single book that she's ever written. I am still on her ARC team to this day. I adore her so much, and this book is my favorite of her books, of like just Serena writing by herself. Brooklyn Air holds such a special place in my heart. It is a CEO and assistant romance. The heroine, Rebecca, is the assistant for Nate Kattenberger, who is this big tech CEO. She has been with him since the start of his company, and she now runs his hockey team. He is this big billionaire and he owns a hockey team, and he asked her to run the hockey team. And one day she steps out on the ice, slips and hits her head, and Nate drops everything to go and take care of her, and it is such a sweet caretaking romance. They both have had crushes on each other at different times but never thought that it would work out, and they finally are at a point in their life where it works out for them, and they're so good together. I love them so much, and like I said, this romance just has a very special place in my heart because of its introducing me to Serena Bowen, to indie romance, to hockey romance. Neither of the people in this book are actually hockey players, but just the Brooklyn Bruisers hockey team is what made me love hockey romance. And so I love it so much. It had to be on this list. There was no world that it didn't end up on this list. Speaking of historicals getting me into reading romance, next one that I have is a historical, and that is Do You Want to Start a Scandal by Tessa Dare. Tessa Dare is the author that got me into historicals. My first real romance as an adult after Red, White, and Royal Blue was The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare, and I just adored Tessa Dare so much. I used to walk around my college listening to the audiobooks and laughing out loud because they're just so funny. And my favorite Tessa Dare book is this, Do You Want to Start a Scandal? This romance is about a heroine who ends up getting ruined, but by accident. She wants to escape the party that she's at because her mother is so overbearing, and she decides to step off into this room alone, and in this room ends up being a man who's standing there, and all of a sudden they start hearing sex noises and they hide, and these people come in and they're having sex, and somebody at the party overhears it and they show up, but the couple that had been having sex has already left, and so the heroine and the hero end up in the room and everyone thinks that they were having sex, and she's like, it wasn't us, but she was in a room alone with a man, so already her reputation is ruined. And so rather than go with it, the heroine doesn't want to end up marrying this guy because she's ruined, and so she decides to set out on this mission to find out who was the couple that were having sex so that she can fix her reputation. It is such a fun romance. I adore it. I actually should really do a reread of this whole series because I love it so much, but this one specifically, it was just something about it that hit me so hard. It was so good, so fun, and one of my favorite historicals, and I still remember how funny it was and how much excitement I had while I was reading it. Next one that I have is Forbidden by Carla Sorensen. This one is a single dad, age gap, slightly forbidden romance. The heroine in this one's name is Isabel Ward, and she is the kind of heroine that I have always said that I relate to. She is somebody who has a lot of walls up. She's somebody who has a hard time expressing her feelings, has a hard time being vulnerable, and she has worked for a long time at this gym. It's like a boxing type gym, and the owner of the gym has recently sold it, and the new owner is the hero, who is a single dad retired MMA fighter, and he decides to keep the heroine on at work, but they end up having a forbidden romance, and it is so good. It is one of those ones that just hit me so hard. Between how much I related to the heroine and how much I loved the hero and his daughter, it was just the perfect storm of an amazing book. The romance was so beautiful, so fun, just that slight hint of forbidden, slight age gap, which made it a little bit taboo, and it was just a perfect mix, and I loved it so much. The next one that I have is one that I talk about a lot, and that is Unraveling Him by Claire Kingsley. Claire Kingsley is one of my favorite authors, and this is the book that made her one of my favorite authors. This book is book 3 in the Bailey Brothers series, but you can read it first. I read it first, and it is a grumpy sunshine romance. This is the book that I always think of when somebody asks me for a Grumpy Sunshine recommendation. This is the perfect Grumpy Sunshine. The hero in this is so grumpy. His name is Evan Bailey. He is slightly reclusive. He lives just like alone, away from all of his brothers, live on the same street, and he just can't deal with that. He likes his space, he likes his privacy, and he lives with his big dog slightly outside of town, and he is a mechanic. And the heroine, her father's mechanic, but she has recently quit from working with him. She can't deal with it anymore, and she leaves, but her car is breaking down. Having met Evan once before, the heroine goes to his mechanic shop, and she knows that Evan is in search of a classic car to restore for this competition that he's trying to do. And so she says, I will help you get this classic car that I know about if you let me fix my car in your garage for free. And Evan can not refuse this deal. He really needs this classic car, and so they embark on a road trip to go get this classic car, and they're having forced proximity. They're stuck in the car together, and the heroine, Fiona, is just so completely sunshiny. She is perfectly happy, smiley, even though her life is kind of messed up at the time. She's so happy, so smiley. She is such a sweetheart, and Evan is just so not here for it until he is. And she really breaks down Evan's walls. He never really leaves his grumpy attitude, but he develops the sweetest soft spot for Fiona, and their romance is just so cute. So much forced proximity, so much grumpy sunshine. It's just perfect. One of my favorites, had to be on this list. Another one that I have is The Mistake by Elle Kennedy. The off-campus series was so amazing to me when I first read it. I loved this so much. I read it on Audible Escape after reading Him by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy and being introduced to Elle Kennedy that way. I went and read the Off Campus series and I loved the deal so much. But there was something about The Mistake, there was something about John Logan that made it that this book took the cake as my favorite in the series. I adored this book. This is a college hockey romance. The hero, John Logan, who's fantastic, is a hockey player and he accidentally knocks on the heroine Grace's door and they end up having a sort of hookup moment. And while they're hooking up, he makes a mistake. She ends up being so angry at him and making him leave, and she is just so pissed off and he is embarrassed, and he ends up realizing that he wants her. He wants her and he wants to apologize, and so she ends up making this amazing list of ways that he can grovel to get her back, and I love it so much. It was so good and so funny to watch him try and do this list. Such a good way for him to prove that he actually wants to go out with her and that it wasn't just like this chase. Also, Logan is dealing with some stuff outside of school. He has a really shitty home life and he has a lot of difficulty with that and how that's going to affect his future. He has a lot of like despair in that way and he's very much holding it in. He's just such a good hero and I loved this book so much. It's so fun and I would highly recommend this whole series, but definitely The Mistake. The next one that I have is another historical, and that is Never Seduces Scott by Maya Banks. And this is probably my favorite historical of all time. This book is about a heroine named Evelyn who is deaf. And there is this feud going on between Evelyn's family, the Armstrongs, and the Montgomery clan. And the king basically makes this proclamation that says that an Armstrong and a Montgomery have to get married. Specifically, the head of the Montgomery clan, Graham, and Evelyn, who is the daughter of the head of the Armstrong clan. And they are forced to marry to fix this rivalry between their families. And Evelyn is deaf, but nobody knows this. Everyone thinks that she's daft. They think she's crazy. Graham ends up marrying Evelyn. He thinks that this is never going to be a real marriage. He also believes that Evelyn is crazy and not all there. But Evelyn shows how freaking strong, how determined, how intelligent she actually is. And it is a absolutely gorgeous, beautiful romance. Graham, regardless of the fact that he thinks that she's crazy, he's like, she's my wife. I will do anything for her. Nobody's gonna talk bad about her. I'm not gonna cheat on her. Everyone's like, nobody would blame you if you went and had a mistress. And he's like, I would never. She's my wife. I married her. And he is so protective of her, and she's so strong and badass, and when he finds out she's deaf, it is just the most beautiful thing, and I adore this so much. It is one of my all-time favorites. It is definitely my favorite historical, and it is just one that I completely recommend to everyone. It means so much to me and I love it so deeply. The next one that I have is a Mariana Zapata, and that is All Roads Lead Here. It is so hard to choose a #1 favorite from one of your favorite authors. But this one, there is something about this that I connected with so deeply. The heroine in this one is really struggling. She's down on her luck. And she decides that she wants to go to the last place that she remembers being truly happy. One year, she lived in this small town with her mom, and it was the last place that she saw her mom before her mom ended up going on a hike and never coming back. She went missing. And the heroine just needs to feel centered, needs to feel comforted, needs to feel happy. And so she decides to go to this last place that she felt that, which is this small town. And she ends up renting this apartment above a garage. But when she gets there, a man greets her with a gun and is like, you're trespassing. And she's like, no, I'm not. I rented this. And it turns out he didn't rent it to her. His son sneakily rented it to her. And he's like, well, I didn't rent it to you. Get out. And she's like, I have a contract, I signed, I'm renting it. And he's like, you can stay for a short time. The hero his name is Rhodes, and he is the one that owns this apartment above the garage, and he is a single father of a teenaged son, and the two of them have this really amazing romance. Rhodes is definitely a grumpy hero. He is a park ranger, I think, and he is definitely grumpy and not happy to have a woman on his property, but the heroine really breaks through his walls, becomes part of their family, and I love the heroine's relationship not only with Rhodes but also with his son. I think it's such a good single dad romance. I love the son in this, and I love that he's a teenager and that he has his own personality, he has his own decision making. He's not just like a little kid, which I loved. And this romance was just so, so good. I loved the heroine trying to find her comfort and her happiness again and herself again. She had really lost herself, and I loved her rediscovering herself and becoming more confident and more centered, and it was just such a great romance to read. I loved it so much. The next one that I have is another one that's going to end up on my favorites of this year, and that is Pucking Around by Emily Rath. I was shocked how much this romance hit me. I knew I would like it. It's reverse harem and it's hockey, which are two of my all-time favorite types of books to read, but something about this hit me so hard, and I love it so deeply. This is a, like I said, reverse harem hockey romance, and it is about a heroine whose name is Rachel, and she ends up getting a job as a sports medicine doctor for this hockey team in Jacksonville. And so she moves there, and she ends up finding out that one of the players on the team is a guy that she had a one-night stand with and this really strong connection with. And she ends up having a romance with him, also his best friend who's the equipment manager for the team, and then also another player on the team named Ilmari. And they have, the four of them together, have one of the most amazing romances that I've read in a really long time. The trust, the communication, the comfort that they all bring together, the found family type aspect of it is so well done. And this book is long, but you get every single person's perspective, you get their deepest thoughts and feelings, and they share them with each other. And it becomes this family, this really comfortable place for all of them to land. And they all have pretty stressful lives. They all have things that they're dealing with, but they find so much comfort in each other, and I thought it was so incredibly well done. It's also queer in the way that the two of the heroes, Jake, the one she had the one-night stand with originally, and also the equipment manager, his best friend Caleb, have a romance together too, which includes a bisexual awakening for Jake, who didn't know that he was attracted to men. And it is such an amazing romance between all of them. And even though Ilmari is not with Jake or Caleb, the relationship that he has with them is so strong, this platonic soulmates kind of aspect of it, and it is so, so good, and I love it so much. Another reverse harem that ended up on this list is the Madison Kate series. I am counting this as one. I'm only holding up book one, but this series as a whole, which I read back to back to back, basically feels like one book to me. I don't even know what happens in each book. I only know what happens in the series. I don't remember where the cutoff is for each book. This is my video. The Madison Kate series counts as one. This series was one of the first reverse harems that I read. It is the series that made me absolutely love reverse harems. I fell in love with them and started reading a billion. It became my one of my all-time favorite tropes. And this is the series that started it all. This series, the Madison Kate series, is about a heroine named Madison Kate who one day is trying to go to this fight when this riot breaks out. And this riot causes a lot of damage. It causes a lot of illegal activity to go on. And on that night, the heroine Madison Kate meets these three guys. And these three guys, she believes, are the ones that started Riot Night, but she gets blamed for it. After leaving Shady Grove, her town, for a couple of years and returning, she ends up seeing those three guys again. They greet her and they are living in her house, and she's super confused, but ends up in a enemies to lovers style romance where she is trying to get back at them for her getting blamed for Riot Night. And it is so twists and turns, and there's gangs and so many things going on. It was just so chaotic and wild. I loved it so freaking much. I was so utterly addicted to it. As I was listening to the audiobooks of this, I was working and I would somebody would talk to me and I would pause it and then they would stop talking and I would play it and it would play for like 30 seconds and then I would have to pause it again. But just that 30 seconds was enough to keep me wanting to go and read more. I was addicted, and it is such a good series. The three heroes are so incredibly different, and this is one of the first books where I realized that reverse harems meant you got so many different types of tropes because each of the heroes was so different. She had such a distinct relationship with each of the heroes, but all three of them together, also her relationship with the three of them together was so different than each relationship individually. I loved in this one especially that the heroes were all really, really best friends, and so they loved each other, even though it was platonic. They loved each other so much that they didn't want to get in the way of each other, but also were so possessive of Madison Kate. There's a stalker that Madison Kate has. There's so much going on, and it is so good, and I love it so deeply. The next one that I have is I think our first MM on this list, and that is Headcase by Onley James. I had to include a book from the Necessary Evils series, and this is my favorite, tied for my favorite, but my favorite in the series. The Necessary Evil series is a series of MM romance that each feature psychopaths. This group of psychopathic family called the Mulvaneys were all the adoptive children of this eccentric billionaire psychologist named Thomas, and he basically went around and adopted a bunch of children with psychopathic tendencies and raised them as his own, but he raised them to be killers, but to only kill bad guys. And this one is, I think, book 4, it says it on the front, book 4 in the series, and it is about Asa Mulvaney, who is one of the adopted children, but he's also a twin. He and his twin Avi were both adopted by Thomas, and they both are psychopaths. In this book, Thomas sends Asa to this banquet where Asa meets Zane. Zane is an aspiring crime reporter. He is trying to make it big as a crime reporter, and he believes that he has uncovered this plot of the Mulvaney families, and he believes that Thomas Mulvaney is a murderer. And so he goes to this banquet because Thomas is supposed to be there, but Thomas has sent Asa, his son. And so Zane and Asa end up hooking up because Zane wants to find out more about the Mulvaney family. And then Asa gets a call where he has to go dump a body with his brother-in-law, and Zane overhears this phone call and decides to follow Asa, and he sees him with this body, takes some pictures, and then gets caught by Asa, and Asa basically kidnaps him so that he can't tell anyone what he saw, and they end up falling in love. And it is amazing. It's so good. I love this whole series, but there was something about this book that just stuck out to me. There's just something about Onley James writing psychopaths. She does it so well, and these are like sweet psychopaths. So Asa is just, he becomes so obsessed with Zane, and it's so fun, and I love it so much. The next one that I have is Always Only You by Chloe Leese. I had to include this book. This was one of the first books that I read that made me feel very seen in the book. The heroine in this one, her name is Frankie, and she deals with rheumatoid arthritis and is also autistic. And the way that Frankie talks about her chronic pain and some of the struggles that she deals with was so relatable to me. I do not have rheumatoid arthritis, but I do deal with chronic pain and I have other chronic illnesses, and I just felt so much like I was reading a book about that could be my real life. And it made me so connected to the characters in this book, so connected to the story, that it made me love it all the more. The actual romance in this book is so good. It is about Frankie, who is the social media person for this hockey team, and she has a romance with Ren Bergman, who is one of the hockey players. He has had a crush on Frankie for a while, and he takes his shot when Frankie's house gets broken into, I believe, and he offers for her to come stay with him, and they start their romance, they fall in love, and it is so good. And there's just something about the way that Chloe Elise writes that makes you feel so perfectly connected to the characters. I could easily insert myself into this book, and it made me feel so good. And reading a book featuring characters that deal with chronic illnesses while you have a chronic illness, that makes this connection happen, and it makes like warmed my heart so much, and I will always be thankful to Chloe Elise for that. Another one that I read this year that's gonna end up on my top favorites is Under the Stars by Laura Pavlov. This one is about a heroine named Georgia who is out of college and just kind of struggling with what to do with her life when she gets a job as the assistant at a publishing house run and owned by this billionaire named Maddox. And she is so sunshiny. This is another grumpy sunshine romance, and she's so sunshiny, she's so happy, and Maddox is so not. He's so grumpy, and I loved this. Georgia shows up at her job, she becomes friends with the people in the office, she just brings this sense of light with her wherever she goes, and Maddox is reluctantly loves it. He is at first super annoyed by it, but he ends up reluctantly loving it, and their romance just made me smile so much. I just felt so happy reading this book, and I feel like this year has been really hard, and so anytime that I find a book that made me as happy as reading this one, it worked so well. It immediately became a favorite because this just made me smile. And I really connected to Georgia also. Some of the things that she's dealing with, I totally got, and it was so good. It was so cute. I highly, highly recommend it. The next one that we have is another romance, and I had to do an Eden Finley, and that's Face Offs and Cheap Shots by Eden Finley and Saxon James. This is book 2 in their CU hockey series, and I adore this series so much. I adore Eden Finley in general, but this is my favorite of the two of them writing together. This one is about two heroes that play hockey together, and they do not like each other. They both want to be captain of their hockey team for the coming year, and the coach basically is like, you two are on top, you are the co-captains. And they don't want to be co-captains, but they end up having this competition to decide who's going to be the #1 captain. They are very different heroes. Jacobs, one of the heroes, is so regimented, very much follows the rules. He's kind of from a small town. He grew up on a farm. He grew up pretty poor, or not really poor, but just not wealthy. And he's used to working hard. And Beck, the other hero, is very partier. He's very lax about the rules. He just likes to have fun. He grew up very wealthy. His parents are very wealthy. And he really has just had a lot of things easy. And they end up fitting together so well. It is a bisexual awakening for both of them. They both thought that they were straight going into this romance, but it is so well done. I loved it so much. Such a fun one, and just one that I definitely reread whenever I just need a good time. Next one that I have is no surprise that it ended up on this list, and that is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. This book is the epitome of fantasy romance. It is the perfect fantasy romance in my eyes. This romance between Rhys and Feyre is stunning. If you don't like this book, we didn't read the same book, because the way that this book is, the way that the romance develops between Rhys and Feyre is just utterly and completely magical. And that's all I have to say about it. The next one that I have is The Forbidden Man by Karina Halley. This is an age gap romance with an older heroine and a younger hero. It is about a heroine whose name is Talia, who recently got divorced and ended up getting let go from her job because of her divorce. She is a sports therapist, and she gets a new job with the soccer team Real Madrid, and she has a no fraternizing with the players policy because of her previous divorce and having a relationship with somebody at your work. And she ends up having a romance with one of the players named Alejo, who is this young hotshot player. And Talia is older. She's, I think, in her 40s, and Alejo, I think, is in his 20s. And he is at fully the start of his career. He's fully rising star, and he loves Talia. He worships her. He thinks she is so perfectly gorgeous, and their relationship is amazing. The way that Alejo makes Talia feel about herself, she gains so much confidence, and it's just so beautiful to see. I haven't talked about it on my channel in a while, but it is one of my favorite books ever, and I love it so much. The next one that I have is Blindsided by Amy Dawes, which is, of course, one of my favorite friends to lovers romances. Mac is a soccer player, and Freya is a plus-sized, kind of quirky heroine. She is very innocent also. She is about to turn 30 years old, and she is a virgin, and she doesn't want to be a virgin anymore, so she asks Mac's help to get a date and to help her lose her virginity. But when Mac finds out that she is trying to lose her virginity to some stranger she doesn't know, he's like, let me help you out with that. And they have a sex lessons, friends to lovers romance. It's so good. I love it so much. It's another one that's just completely and utterly heartwarming, and one that like really makes me smile. It's one that I'll reach for when I'm having a bad day and I want to reread. Their romance is so good. Highly recommend the audiobook also, because Mac's accent in the audiobook is everything. I had to have it on this list. It's one of my all-time favorites. Then, of course, this list would not be complete without a Kennedy Ryan. This is my favorite Kennedy Ryan. I would be shocked if she wrote a book that I loved more than this. This book, wow. This book is about the hero Canon, who is a movie director, and he is casting for his new movie, which is about the Harlem Renaissance, when he goes to a show and ends up seeing the heroine Neva. He thinks that she's perfect for this role. He finds her breathtaking, and he wants her for his lead in his movie. He is very attracted to her. They're both very attracted to each other. There's something about each other that draws each other in, but Canon has previously had bad experiences having relationships with women from his sets, and so he does not want to have a relationship, get into a relationship with her, but they can't help it, and they end up having a slightly forbidden style of romance. Neva also deals with lupus, and there's some amazing discussion of chronic illness in this book. The way that Canon loves her is gorgeous. I cried during this book, and I do not cry very often in books. It's very rare that I cry in books, but there was just the way that I felt reading this book, the way that Canon loves Neva. I annotated the shit out of this book. I cried. It is everything. It is everything. If I could only recommend you a few books from this list, this would be one of them. please read it. The next one that I have is Juniper Hill by Daphne Perry. This is one of my top favorite books of last year. There is something about this book that just makes me so happy. This romance is a single mother romance about a heroine who grew up in a wealthy family and ends up having a child, and her family kind of rejects her when she has this child, and so she leaves and she comes to this small town where she decides to make it for herself, and she gets a job as a maid, and she ends up staying in this apartment above Knox Eden's garage. And Knox is this very grumpy hero. He doesn't really want somebody living above his garage, but his sister, he can't say no to his sister, who's the one that asked him. And Knox has had struggles in the past with being in a relationship, and with he is a little traumatized by it, so he does not want to get too close to the heroine Memphis or her son, but they end up falling in love, and this romance is so sweet. It is the little things in this book, the little day-to-day sweet moments that make this book so romantic. It isn't the big gestures, the grand gestures, the big moments. It's the small little things that make day to day so special and gorgeous, gorgeous. The next one is Sea of Ruin by Pam Godwin. This is such an interesting romance. I put off reading this for so long. Don't know why. This book blew me away. I've never read anything like it, and I honestly don't know if I will ever read anything like it again. This one is about a heroine named Bennett who is a pirate captain, and she is this badass pirate captain. She's so cool, but she is running from another pirate named Priest. She doesn't want to deal with him. When she gets kidnapped or captured by the pirate captain Ashley, and she ends up having a romance with him, and it's wild, it's different, it's dark as shit. Please be careful, check trigger warnings when you're reading this book, but it's amazing. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil it, but oh my god, this book. Another one that I have is another favorite from last year, and that's Broken Vow by Sophie Lark. This is another one where I connected so strongly with the heroine. The heroine in this one's name is Riona, and she's another heroine who's very prickly. She has a lot of walls. She doesn't like to be vulnerable. She's part of the Irish Mafia, and she is a lawyer for the Irish Mafia, and she is in danger. There's somebody who's trying to kill her, and her family friend ends up hiring a bodyguard for her, and the bodyguard's name is Raylan, and they have a romance, and it's forced proximity because of the bodyguard aspect, and Raylan helps Riona feel so safe and helps her really let down her walls and show her vulnerability. This romance was beautiful. I love them together. Raylan was so perfect for her. He's the sweet, sexy cowboy who she needed, and it's perfect. We're almost to the end. The next one that I have is a not surprise if you've watched any of my videos, because it's Him by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy. It is one that I have read 1 billion times. It is another one that when I first read it, I became so completely obsessed with it. It is one of the books that got me started in MM. It is one of the books that got me started in hockey romance. Some of my all-time favorite tropes are because I read and loved this book. And there is just something about Wes and Jamie. They are complete and utter soulmates, and they are perfect for each other. This one is a childhood friends to lovers romance with a bisexual awakening. Wes and Jamie used to go to camp together. They were best friends, but when something happens between them that makes Wes feel embarrassed, he basically ghosts Jamie. And then it's years later when they are graduating from college and they play against each other in the Frozen Four, and they see each other again. Jamie has been camp counselor at the camp that they go to as kids since they went to the camp as kids, and Wes decides to become a counselor for the summer so that he can see Jamie again, and he admits to Jamie that he is gay, and that he had been in love with him, and they have an amazing romance. The love that the two of them share is so strong, so true, and I adore it so fucking much. The next one is the last one from this year's reading, and that's Reckless by Elsie Silver. This book, I loved the rest of the Chestnut Springs series, but this book takes the cake for me with this series. It is a surprise pregnancy romance between Winter and Theo. Winter has had some shit in her life. She struggles. She's another one that people really think is really prickly. She's another one that has a lot of walls up, and Theo is perfect for her. They have a one-night stand and she gets pregnant and she tries to tell him, and she thinks that he basically rejects her and doesn't want anything to do with the baby, but it turns out he didn't get the message. And so when he comes back to town and finds out that he has a kid, he drops everything and he loves the kid and also Winter. He is 100% there for both of them. Their romance is so beautiful. The family that they create between the three of them is so, so cute, and I loved this so much. Please read it. Do not get afraid by the hype of this series. It is so well deserved, and this book is amazing. We are down to the last one, the 25th book, and that is Welcome to the Dark Side by Gianna Darling. This book was my first intro into dark romance. I had not really read a ton of age gap at that time. I hadn't even read that many taboo romances. Pretty much the only taboo romances that I had read at the time were Credence and Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. They were the only ones that I had really started to dip my foot into taboo and dark romance. And then I jumped into the deep end and decided to read this one, which is a serious age gap motorcycle club romance, and it is amazing. This one is about Lou, and she is the daughter of the mayor of the town, and when she was a little girl, there was a shooting where she ended up seeing and running towards Zeus, who is the head of this motorcycle club. And Zeus ends up going to jail for the shooting, but Lou doesn't forget him and ends up writing him while he's in jail, and they become pen pals. And she's about 7 years old, I think, when it first starts, but they become pen pals, they're friends. Lou relies on Zeus a lot for emotional comfort just because her family is so rejectful. Her family just doesn't really care about her at all. And Lou was forced to grow up very fast. She ends up having cancer, and when she is 17 years old, she sees Zeus again, and they end up starting a romance. And it is amazing. It is amazing. Their relationship is so strong. They are utter soulmates. They are soulmates. They have a huge age gap, but it doesn't matter. They are soulmates. They're so perfect together, and Lou fits into his world and his life so seamlessly. She's been through so much more in her 17 years of life than grown-ass adults have, and she does not seem immature for him. She doesn't seem like she is too young for him. She's perfect for him, and they are perfect for each other, and I love this book so much. That is the last one though. Those are 25 of my all-time favorite books for my 25th birthday, and I just want to say thank you for watching my videos and for the community that I have become a part of through YouTube and through the book industry, and it just makes me so happy that I get to come on here and talk about some of my all-time favorite books and possibly recommend any to you that might become some of your favorite books too. So just wanted to say thank you, and I'm really hopeful for my 25th year of life and what I have in store this year. I'm crossing my fingers at that. It'll be an amazing one. So thank you guys for watching. Like this video if you liked it, subscribe, stick around and see more content from me. But other than that, I hope that you have the absolute best day.